How you doing, guys? It's Tom here. I'm talking to you today about integrating your identity provider, so your IDP, with Zscaler, who is a service provider. Now, a lot of you may not know this, or you may already be aware of this, but Zscaler is not an IDP. You do have accounts on Zscaler within their cloud, local accounts to log in as an administrator, but we actually integrate Zscaler with our primary IDP, our secondary IDP, you can have multiple, and leverage the controls that already exist in your IDP. So let's go through in this video exactly how that works. I'm going to use Entra ID, a very popular IDP, arguably the most popular identity provider in the world, and how we actually link the two services together. So let's get stuck into it. So I've given Zscaler support my domain name that I want to use as my UPN for my users, the domain name that is integrated with my primary identity provider. So let's draw it first, and then we'll come back to exactly how to integrate this and get it set up. So we have Zscaler, the Zero Trust Exchange, as we call it. Nice fluffy cloud. User comes in. So I've got my user here. This user has the Zscaler client on their machine. They come into the Zero Trust Exchange. And then the first thing we do is try and figure out, okay, who are you? At the front door, let's identify this person. So I have my Entra ID tenant. This can be Okta, Ping, on-prem ADDS if necessary. We send them over here to go and get a token. Entra, can you tell me this person is who they say they are? They can jump through conditional access hoops. They can have MFA configured, FIDO2, whatever controls you've already set up in Okta or Entra ID. And they come back and they tell Zscaler, yeah, this person is who we think it is. And this is their level of risk and so on and so forth. And then we provide access and broker access to all the lovely things that sit behind Zscaler. So your SaaS apps, your internet access, your private apps in your data center or in IaaS, in Azure, AWS, GCP, wherever these things are, we know who the user is, so we can then broker access to these things. What we need to do is establish this relationship. How does this bit work? How does Zscaler know to go and ask this Entra tenant? From a high level, Zscaler is added to the Entra ID tenant as an enterprise application. You've got a couple of different options. So normally it's SAML. So this process, this communication that happens between the two is SAML, but we can also use OIDC, OpenID Connect. This is great for step-up authentication and a few other sort of more advanced IDP protocols that you get with OIDC. We also have a synchronization process. So this enterprise app that I mentioned, you add Zscaler as an app into your IDP. The SAML process is the authentication steps that occur, but there's also a synchronization of what lives in this Entra ID directory, the metadata of those objects into the Zero Trust Exchange, into Zscaler. So Zscaler knows to expect Joe Bloggs, and you can apply rules and policies and things against that Joe Bloggs account that has come from Entra ID. And that's using SCIM to synchronize those attributes to your Zero Trust Exchange tenant. You don't have to use SCIM. You can also use just-in-time access or JIT as well. So there are a couple of decisions to make. Select your primary IDP. This is quite self-explanatory because this will be the primary UPN, the primary user identity, username that your employees are going to use to access Zscaler. So that should be a pretty straightforward decision. Then you need to think about the type of authentication framework that's going to be used. Do you want to synchronize these attributes or use just-in-time access technology? It's a couple of fundamental decisions about how you want to integrate identity with Zscaler. So I'm going to walk you through now the step-by-step process to get this configured. So click New Application, and in the Entra gallery, simply search for Zscaler. Now there are a few results here, 25 to be exact. Now Zscaler in the top left with the dark blue icon, that is the one you're actually looking for Z Identity. There are some others here for different use cases, but for the purposes of Z Identity integration with OIDC, the one that you're going to want to select is the one that just simply says Zscaler. Give it a name. Obviously, by default, it says Zscaler, so I'm going to stick with that and click Create. The next step is to create a secret for this integration to use. So on the left, head over to Certificates and Secrets. Choose to create a new client secret. I'm going to call mine Zscaler, but we'll leave this as the recommended 180 for now. Click Add. So here you can see we have our client secret created. We have a description, the expiry date, and a couple of new things, a value and a secret ID. So make sure you copy these somewhere you can get back to them later, a notepad, a credential manager, somewhere safe, because we're going to need these bits of information in the next few steps. On the left side menu, click on API permissions. Then you'll see a button here for grant API consent for default directory. Click that and click on yes. Now head over to token configuration on the left. Choose to add an optional claim, and the claim token type is going to be ID. Here we have a list of the different claims and a description of the claims that we can use in this integration. What we need to add are the email and preferred username. Email, preferred username. Click Add. Next, we also need to add a groups claim. We've got 4 options here. You're going to need to select the bottom one, groups assigned to the application. Under ID, select group ID, which is actually selected by default, and then click Add. Now click on Manifest. Here we can see a JSON representation of the application manifest. If you scroll down to around lines 28 and 30, we're going to change accepted mapped claims to true, and we're going to update the requested access token version from null to 2, and then click save. If we head back to the enterprise app that's been published, you can see our Zscaler app that we've added here, and then we're going to want to assign users to this application. So I can add individual people or I can add a group. I'm going to select those and assign, and then on the left under the enterprise application menu, click on single sign-on, and here we have the attributes and claims for this enterprise application. We've got groups and user.groups. Click on edit and choose to add a new claim. And then we need to select an attribute. So we have user.department. Then click save. So for the next part, you're going to need to log in to your Zscaler admin portal. We have Z identity, and under integration, external identities, we're going to add a primary IDP. We're going to give it a name. I'm going to call this Entra ID. Here you can see a number of vendors. We'll select Microsoft Entra ID, select the domain that you want to associate with this IDP configuration. The login attribute by default is preferred username, but you can use a different attribute if you choose to. We'll set this as enabled. So now this is the part where we're going to need the bits of information that we took from the Azure portal and put in a notepad or in a credential manager. So we have the OpenID URL. We can put that into the metadata URL field of the Zscaler UI and click fetch. And you'll see it pre-populates all of the different endpoints we're going to need. We can copy the redirect URI, copy the value and secret ID, into these fields here. So secret ID into client secret, click save. So now we need to switch back one last time to the Azure portal. This is the enterprise app, but we're going to want the registered application. So app registrations, all applications, we have Zscaler. Click on authentication and add a platform. Here select web, enter the redirect URI and click configure. So now our IDP, Entra ID, is integrated with the service provider, Zscaler. But now we need to think about how we're going to provision users, i.e. how we're going to copy attributes or objects from our database of people and groups and things and attributes that belong to those users into this service provider platform. So there's 2 options. You've got JIT, or just-in-time access, or SCIM, using a custom app from the gallery. For this demo, I'm going to install and configure just-in-time access. So if we go back into the Zscaler admin portal, external identities, if you click this little pencil, you can edit this and click on the provisioning tab at the top here. So you've got your basic information tab, advanced, and then provisioning. Here we can turn on just-in-time provisioning. So here I'm going to use the groups attribute for just-in-time user group attributes, email for the just-in-time attribute that I'm looking for, mapped against the user attribute of primary email, and click update. So I'm going to be really honest here, I did make a mistake. If I edit my IDP configuration again, so I tried to log in as an account that had never logged into Zscaler before, and that account is an Entra ID account, just to show that it worked. And I did notice that I'd put the client ID and the client secret in wrong. So the client ID, to be really clear, if you go to the registered application, the app registration, in Entra, it's this application client ID here. So B6CD, that needs to live here in client ID, B6CD, makes sense. What I'd put in there was the secret ID, not the ID of the application itself. And then the client secret is the value of the client secret itself. So if you go back to certificates and secrets, it is actually this value here that you only see once. So now everything is working. So if I open up an incognito or in private window and head back to Zscaler, so console.zscaler.com, I can put in my credentials. I'll then be redirected to Entra. I'll put in my password. And then it's going to ask me to enroll a security key or biometric, and my account has been enrolled. Now I have hit an error here, access denied, and this actually makes sense because my account hasn't been given any admin permissions yet. There's no admin privileges against this identity. Now the odd thing is I have to try and log in initially to get it to appear in the portal to give it permissions in the first place. So if we head back to Z Identity, I can now see that the account I'm trying to log in with is listed under the directory users. But the next thing to do is just give this account permissions, which I'm going to do now, and then log back in. I hope that was useful as a little bit of a guidance around how the relationship works between a service provider and an identity provider, in our example Microsoft and Zscaler. And the documentation I'll put in the link below the video. There's a really thorough guide that actually goes through the other alternative ways to set that up. So SCIM, SAML, rather than OIDC and just-in-time access. So feel free to look at that. Any questions, put in the chat below. I'd love to see your comments and thoughts.